what do people want most? They want a great quality at a decent price. And a lot of them want it fast. So of course, again, it's another whole cliche thing, but you can't have all three of those things all at once. What we do is we try and put in a realistic time frame, but more importantly, by working with these subs or contractors that we have for so many years and paid them on time every Friday, whether it hurt us or not, gives us also the ability to really budget better. We get better pricing.
Travis Louie with RE Construction. How are you today?
Doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for joining us. We'll get right into it, and if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and about your business.
Sure. So we started a company back in 2014. I named it Real Estate Chasers LLC. Specifically, it pertained to what we did back in the day. So you got to remember, back in 2014, we were pretty much at a climax, as you couldn't really turn the radio on, or for that matter, listen to a podcast about flipping a house, or turning on a TV and not seeing a commercial about learning how to use other people's money to build a net worth, to fix and flip, and to live a lifestyle of luxury. So we were at the part of it. Our job was to go out, knock on doors, identify properties, working through realtors, what they called wholesalers back then, including, again, just knocking on doors, identify a good property, identify what the scope is, meaning what is it going to take to actually put that house on the market. Once that was done, we were going out and finding crews to actually everything from foundation, all your M&Ps, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, foundation, roof, everything, sheetrock, paint, put that all in a pretty little package, find the investors for it, gap that what they call the fund, and put the house on the market. And then we would get paid at the end. At one particular point, I would say between 2000, I would say it was the summer of 2014 leading into the beginning of 2015, we were running anywhere between 10 and 15 fix and flips at that particular time. Some of them would range from easy $5,000 to $10,000. We're going in there just doing flooring, paint, sheetrock work, and putting it on the market quick, easy. Others, we had to do additions. We had to do 600 to 900 square foot additions to houses to add value, to hit what they called an ARV, and I'm pretty sure it's a term that's been used repeatedly. So your appraised or resale value of that property was based off of what you put into it, obviously, and everybody was doing it. About 2017, 2018, properties were trying really hard to find. Uh, most hard money lenders would look for what they called a 70% LTV, which means they would only loan on a certain amount of your rehab and the property itself. And so, because everybody was jumping into the game, they were really raising the values of what these properties were. For an example, on the south side of town, I remember there was a shack that we had bought right in the middle, right next to a highway for $50,000. Right, $50,000, and I'm thinking that's a lot of money. No, no.
Back in the
Well,
day.
yeah. What's the $50,000 for? I mean, I'm looking for buried treasure as we're digging up for the foundation. Like, what am I missing here? You fast forward to where we're at right now in that same neighborhood, because it has been gentrified and they have new builds there. That one piece of property is now worth over $195,000, just the lot itself. So you can't really make that money anymore. You know what I mean? So about 2017, that flip started slowing down a little bit because we really didn't want to get into projects that we couldn't deliver. Not saying every single one of them was perfect, right? A lot of them, sure, we did end up losing money. Some of them breaking even, but what made it up was the home runs that you actually hit, and that's why you kept going. 2017, we started slowing down, but we were approached by a builder out in Austin. They said, "Hey, Travis, we need some crews up here to do some warranty work for us, i.e., flooring repair, sheetrock repair, paint. If a house flooded, they would give us a call and say, 'What do we do?'" So we were able to actually start working with them at that particular time frame, 2017, 2018. We went from having two crews up to five crews, and we were doing this between Austin and San Antonio. We started expanding our markets, and in 2019, we were working in Houston as well. We had between three and four different builders that we were actually working for, again, between San Antonio, Austin, and Houston. Uh, Fast forward to today, over the past 3 or 4 years, given our economic climate, That's shut down a little bit. You know, builders, I wouldn't say they stopped building, but I know that they still had a lot of inventory that was on the market that they needed to get rid of first before they can continue building. Now, of course, again, where we're at right now, you've got inflated material prices. You know, our demand is still going up, and our but we still have the inventory for it. I think within the next year, and I'm no expert, but I would think that the next year, year and a half, you're going to see it turn back around to where we were before. Um, and that was basically the start of it. We're trying to diversify more out towards, you know, right now we're working on a new build. We're about to finish it up. It's a little 900 square foot casita. We've got bids out on building barn dominiums. So we're we're diversifying in that arena. But to me, what we're showcasing and what we're doing is we're showing the ability to kind of adapt, but more importantly, create our own demand. So what we did as a company as well is I opened up another company called Antades. I named it after my two newborn nieces and my grandson, and Tatiana and Ezra. And it's specifically meant for new builds. Our first projects walking into 2025, hopefully, is going to be building duplexes. They're going to be spec homes. They're going to be infield developments. That's really what we want to do. We've been approached and we've tried container home building, modular home building, uh, boxable homes building being put up. But as an infill development in the middle of a city, kind of where you want to be, the city kind of makes it a little bit tough for that. I'm talking inspections, how they're building their plan development, what they're going to actually allow within a city or within a block or within an area. Once you start getting outside, like Spring Branch areas, Dripping Springs, it becomes a little bit less, but that market becomes so hard to build out there because there's no infrastructure that your probability of or controlling the probability becomes a little bit harder. And that's why we really are sticking with the infill developments with Ontades backed up by REC since we've been open since 2014. Um, you know, I'm proud to say that under our flag, we do have a B1 residential builder license under our encampment. I can tell you that the IRC has made it difficult over the past just year and a half, 2 years to where anybody could step in the state of Texas and apply for a general contractor's license and you're a general contractor as long as you showed good insurance and you showed that you were the company that you said you were. Here, they actually forced you or the license holder to take a test. What that does for us as a company, and I hate to say it like this, but it roots out a lot of the competition. However, our market is still where it's at right now. So it needs to cure. So REC has a great future in front of it, specifically on where we're at in our time frame, because I know that we're going to go through another turn. And I think things for construction is going to come back up. I think that you're going to see the fix and flip market come back up. I mean, I'm starting to hear it on the ground. More people are starting to find, yeah, I found this great deal. I'm going to flip it. Hey, go with God. Good luck with all that. But you're starting to hear it more and more and more. So really the game for us is to create enough diversification to keep us alive. If one nest doesn't end up working out, including working with the builders or the remodels, because there's so much competition out there. You know, you hear they're getting it done cheaper, Travis. You guys are so expensive, but I know I can get it done. I have more of a probable outcome with the budget that I set up. With the influx of work or lack thereof of work, you've got a cheaper mentality of guys that used to, for instance, guys that used to work for $350 a day and demanded $350 a day. Now they're working for $200 a day because there's not enough work out there. They're out there competing, and that's what's kind of killing our market. Thus, going into the new builds, we're creating our own demand. I keep on going back to that because that is more of a circular for us, a circular installation for both of our companies. But that's what we've been dealing with in a nutshell.
Well, that's great, and you've been able to take each section of your business and be able to diversify. I don't think many people would be able to take a skill set from one area and find and develop a process for another. So kudos to you on that end. You talk about the general contractors that are out there, and I know from my own friends, there have been horror stories from, like you said, a general contractor can be anyone who comes into the state and wants to build a house. All they need to do is really get insurance. They need to have insurance so that if they burn down a house, at least they're covered from that standpoint. But there's no workmanship quality test or
No.
anything like that. So by getting that differentiation, you are able to market yourself as a different contractor. Speak a little bit about that. Your process and your workflow compared to some of the others that you've seen, because I think every industry deals with this issue, especially the good contractor versus poorer contractor, and the actual quality that you're putting into your work and what the homeowner is getting at the end of the day.
I think a lot of it has to do, and it sounds kind of backwards, but it really depends on the contractor's purse strings as well. And let me explain. Because you can't really expect for a client just to pop up and just give you $100,000 right out the gate to do it. No, they're going to budget it. They're going to hold you back. They're going to require a payment schedule. Without that payment schedule, you're kind of lost in the wind. You've got to look to see where your funds are being appropriated. Most importantly, where's the money from the client and how is it funding my guys? Because you have to keep in mind that 99.9% of the subcontractors that we use, or the contractors that we use, they want to get paid every Friday, come hell or high water, right? One of the biggest thing in our industry is once you find a good sub and you want to keep them around, you better keep them around. If he can do it for you, you do it. You pay him every Friday. You pay him well. Of course, you got to be balanced in what you give him and what you take from him, but you want to pay him extremely well. The client really doesn't care about that. If you have a restroom that needs to be done, the only thing that you care about is, Travis, I need this done in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. You don't care that my guys need to get paid on Friday, but you're not going to give me money unless, let's say, 50% of it's done. Well, I still got to pay my guy every Friday. So unless I actually have extra funds to do it, I'm not going to move forward with it. Point in case, and this has kind of hurt us a little bit too. I'm not naming any names on builders, but builders, they have what they call a 30-day net. Okay. Which means that if I do work for a builder today and I invoice today, I'm probably not going to see it for 30 days. I'm not going to see that money, but I had to pay my workers,
and your materials
and everything to get paid. Because of where we're at, again, I keep on going back to our environment, our economic environment. Now, sometimes it's taken 60 to 90 days to get paid. At one particular point, 3 or 4 years ago, REC was, now this is accounts receivables, over $550,000 that was owed to us. Right, between all these builders because of what was happening, and that really did sink us. The fact that we were able to endure that. Now we had to cut crews. We had to cut crews. We had to cut ways of how we were marketing, and that was our biggest deal. Yeah, it was killed. But I go back to what kept us along this far, I would believe, and knock on wood, was the fact that we were able to budget money, but we were able to save money on our own account to where I'm not robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Totally.
And that's what those contractors are running up against. Because once that homeowner says, I'm not paying you this Thursday for Friday, you're going to have to finish this up, they're gone. I'll get to you when I can get to you. Meaning, yeah, I'll come back tomorrow, but they don't show up till the following Wednesday or Thursdays because they had to cover their payroll by finishing other jobs with clients that are willing to pay. Yeah. So a lot of those stories you're going to hear.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, right? I mean, not only for the homeowner's perspective, for sure, but for the contractor, they started out just as gung ho as anyone else did to do a great job. But you do find these pitfalls, and if you aren't able to set up your business in the right way, and if you're not able to develop those processes, the proper timeline of payment for each client, sure, you do end up having to sell some jobs to then pay off the current job because that payment's coming, and then you'd run into more issues. I mean, it is a cyclical business.
It absolutely is. But having that money and being properly budgeted is one thing. The other thing is managing expectations for clients. And that's another big thing that kills people is you can walk into a kitchen and just say you want the flooring done. And you can say, you know what, I expect the flooring to look like $1 million kitchen, but you're only using, 99 cent square foot, LVT. The problem is it's not going to look like that, but your contractor that really wants the job is going to sell you. It's going to look immaculate. Call Town and Country right now after we're done because you're going to get that thing. And guess what? I'm going to get it done in 3 days.
Yep.
It's not, I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Over promising, under deliver.
That's correct. And then what hurts even more is once they don't deliver that expectation, now as a client, you're going to say, dude, I'm not paying you anything for that. When are you going to fix it? And that's where that circle starts happening. And that's where you start finding other people saying, you know what, I'm going to find another contractor. If you can't do it, I'm going to find somebody else. And that's where clients start losing more money because now they're almost doubling down on starting off the process.
And they want to keep you to a tighter schedule because they've been burned in the past and
That's
all
correct.
of those things too. I think that's a great thing to touch on because in every business we have to do that, right?
That's correct.
And unfortunately you're going to lose some business because someone else goes in there and they overpromise, right? And they, you're looking at their numbers saying, if that's too good to be true, watch out for it, Mrs. Homeowner, because it ends up being too good to be true. And you've at least been in the business long enough to realize when it is overpromised and they probably are going to underdeliver. And unfortunately, I can't meet their price because that's just unrealistic.
It sounds asinine. My approach is sometimes I'll feel better that I didn't get a job. Specifically because I wouldn't cut my prices by $2,000 or $3,000, but that gave me an idea of what type of client that was going to be and what they were expecting. And so at the end of the day, I felt better signing off by saying, I'm here if you need me. If this goes wrong, give me a call. I'm always going to be able to here to help you, whether you use us or not. But that's the whole deal. So you've got to be able to manage expectations, but more importantly, set forth a good budget. And not really cut corners. And it's almost cliche because every good contractor out there is going to tell you that. Following it and actually putting it into practice day after day is another issue, especially when you're dealing with multiple trades, when you're dealing with multiple contractors, because you have to keep them all on the same side and all on the same page, especially when you're going through a process. One trade could hold back a project 2 or 3 months because of the lack of budgeting or lack of planning or lack of oopses.
And being able to manage each individual contractor separately. You have to be very knowledgeable about each individual trade that you have on site to these jobs, so that you can manage not only the customer's expectation, but then also manage that crew. Because, in general, when you're hiring subcontractors, they might send a manager there or they might not. And so you now become the pseudo manager with a crew that, you're trusting and you've probably paid for upfront for materials and for a certain amount of labor. And now it's getting them to show up every day. It's getting them to finish off the job while still managing the customer's expectations.
I think that's what, and our philosophy was to put the contractors first, and I still have that mentality. Put that subcontractor first. I think that's what got us this far because there are crews that started working with me back in 2014 on other people's projects that are still with me today, working on other people's projects. It's because I paid them every Friday, whether it hurt me or not, whether it took money from my bank account or not. They got paid every Friday. And that's you got to keep that because you got to be able to have a Johnny on the spot or at least have somebody that you can count on when something happens. Hey, I really need this thing painted today.
And that's going to come back if you have a problem with their work.
That's correct.
Right? Because they see the value of you.
Yep,
and they want to work for you specifically. And so they are more willing to bend over backwards to make sure that you're happy at the end of the day, to make sure the customer's happy and to make sure that they get another job from you. There's been many times that, we've dealt with people that they messed up the first time, but they came back a second and third time to make sure that everything was done the right way. But like you said, someone who shows up on time, someone that's able to do the quality work that at the end of the day you expect, because your clients also expected, they are invaluable. And some of the things that I see contractors do on a day-to-day basis, it blows my mind, because it's a craft, it's a trade, and it's an art piece at the end of the day. The fact that someone's able to take an idea and create it into a product is something that, in my mind, as an HVAC guy, we're getting it from the manufacturer and we're having to manufacture that system inside of an environment, and that is a piece of art. I guess I look at it differently.
Yeah.
But when you talk about the carpentry and the cabinets inside of a kitchen, those can be works of arts.
They can be. I mean, they're your signatures, if you think about it, for builders. But it all comes down to, discount on this one. I've got another project that's coming down the road. We've got to keep our prices competitive, and that's how you do it. You do it within, meaning you do it within the tools that you already have. Just treat them well.
And the relationships you've created.
Yeah. Oh God. Sometimes a little bit too close. Too close.
Well, but from a distribution channel, I know from my distributors, they want to work with me because I've developed that relationship over and over again. And when I do tell them about the project that's coming up, I'm sure they get that a lot from X, Y, and Z contractors. But since I've been able to, bring them bigger jobs or, bigger orders from a job that I have in the near future, they're able to trust me and they're able to bring in equipment sooner for me. They're able to, bring in more equipment at a larger discount for them, which obviously is passed to me.
Sure, absolutely. One thing to really realize too for general contractors, and this is really for clients of yours as well, is you need a contractor that understands the parameters of his own knowledge and what he's using certain aspects for. Let me give you an example. Like, for instance, and I think at one particular point we might have actually worked on one of them to where the damage was so bad that it started deteriorating LVLs or actual structural walls. And so it was a simple LVL that needed to be replaced, but I'm not touching that unless I actually have an engineer, and that adds cost. Yes, it was one 10-foot LVL, but I'm going to need an engineer to come look at it and tell me exactly what I need to do to it. Furthermore, before I cover it up with sheetrock, he needs to come and look at it and say, I'm blessed. It's good. Why? Because it's CYA. I'm not an engineer. I mean, I can look at it and say, yeah, it
looks good.
It looks good, but I don't have that stamp that says, yeah, it is correct. It is good to go.
More importantly, it looks good from your house.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to look into stuff like that. Is your contractor aware of that?
Or of their limitations, because you're absolutely right. I think the relationships that you create are, hey, I know a guy for this. And when you've developed that circle of trust between the contractors that you've used on an everyday basis, they know they want to show up to your job because most of the time it's something that is within their scope of work. And now you can learn from them and be able to educate homeowners on why you need to bring in this next person, because I do know the limitations and I don't want to put your safety at risk.
And that's the whole deal.
I
tell my clients that all the time, because they're like, do you really need an engineer? I was like, yeah, I'd like to be able to sleep at night. I really do. I want to sleep at night. And the last thing that I need looming over my head is, oh my God, I hope that wall doesn't move. It looks good. The paint job was spectacular.
Because you know that you can do the work.
That's correct.
You want to be able to ensure that it's properly done from an engineering standpoint.
That's
and
correct.
maybe engineer is just one person out there that you would bring in, but I think that's one of the most important, because there definitely are contractors out there that just decide to save $1,000 for the client or be able to mark up $1,000 because they're not using an engineer.
It's like that, depending on certain areas as well. But that's the deal is, we turn down a lot of business because we are going to pull permits. I mean, that's just the deal. I mean, San Antonio, that's kind of what had us thrive for a little bit too. There was a small niche that we were working with. There was a hard money lender. I can't say their name, but there was a hard money lender. And what would happen is we would have investors come in there, buy a piece of property totally wrong, walk in and say, yeah, this is only a $20,000 rehab. It ends up being a $50,000 or $60,000 rehab because it needs structural stuff. and they had to default because they couldn't get it past, certain inspections. I want to say probably, and I'm maybe predating it a little bit. I would say about 2011, 2012. Uh, the city of San Antonio came up with what was called the strike team. Okay, the strike team's sole purpose was to go out, find projects that were going on, remodeled projects, because of the height of fix and flips that were going on, and see if they were doing it correctly or not. And so, for instance, and there's rumors of this, but I feel it because I've seen it. Is for this one particular company, they had several inspectors during the weekend. They would drive through the neighborhood. They would see a for sale sign in front of the house. They would look it up. They would look up the listing, and the listing will say remodeled from top to bottom, addition this. It was extravagant. Inspector's thinking, okay. He hops back into his vehicle. He sees if there's any permits. Nope, no permits. No, nothing, huh? Okay. Automatically, they had the power to shut down the power to the house. Put a big pink sticker on there that says, yeah, you can't move forward. You got to contact the strike team.
Wow.
And what they'll do is they'll have you go in and actually tear up sheetrock so they could see where your Romax is going, where your structural is, right? And your fees double, and your wait time for inspections double. So you can't. Back in the day, I would never touch a project that wasn't going to get permitted properly.
And this was a strike team that went after homeowners that
No,
hired contractors.
or projects in general.
So that strike team would go to the homeowner, say, "Hey, who did you work with? They didn't pull permits," and then basically would trickle down from
That's
there.
correctly. And
Crazy.
how it would affect the client is that they wouldn't be able to sell their home. The process went from maybe a 6-month rehab to almost 9 to 12 months because of what they're having to do, whether it was zoned correctly, whether there were engineered plans, whether the plans were reviewed. They have those processes in place for a reason. And I'm coming from the school of, great, let's follow those, because again, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a city inspector, right? Each one of the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing guys, when they go out there and they do their inspections, like rough-ins or finals, that's their expertise. I don't have that. What I do have the capability of doing is putting together teams, running it, putting together a budget, and executing it the way I have the most probable outcome possible. And that's what we do.
And you were talking about CYA earlier.
That's a lot of it.
Totally. having other people bless each individual portion of the job at the end of the day makes you feel better and helps you sleep at night.
That's correct. More importantly, it comes with a price, and we're able to justify that price. And we're always going to be there for clients, though. And I say this now, even with clients that never use us, if they ever needed help with anything, we would always be there. But to me, I think being in the business for as long as, or not, it's only been 10 or 11 years. Some of these guys have been in business for 20 or 30 years. Is I would rather lose the business than embark onto a project that I know was it's not fun. It's just not fun anymore. So we've been able to kind of evolve in that direction.
Yeah, and I've always kind of taken it as if I walk through the supermarket and I see one of those potential clients or a client that didn't do business with me, I want to be able to talk to them in the grocery store and not have to bounce to the next aisle.
Absolutely.
Right, you want to be able to look them in the eye and at least know that you did the right thing for that person specifically. I love to see the passion that you have for this as well. It's really nice from my perspective to see a contractor that you touched on for the customer specifically. And I think that is probably why you've gone through each iteration of your company, is really just to be able to serve people at a higher level.
That is, to put it the easiest, and I use this a lot, the most predictable outcome is really what we strive to have. And it takes a team. It really does. When especially for contractors that are just coming into the business, again, I haven't been in for that long. I really haven't.
So what would you say differentiates you from people who maybe have been around that same time period, right? They've been in the business for 10, 11 years. What differentiated you from maybe some of the other people that you've met that have been in the game for as long as you have? What do you think you did differently to get to the level that you're at today versus some of those other contractors?
Oh God, the only thing that I can come up with was my pain threshold. That's basically what it is. Coming from my family background and where they're at, because my family owns one of the oldest mom and pop pet stores in San Antonio. In fact, we're
Oh,
still just over 50 years old.
wow.
The client's always first, right? You got to take that mentality. But the other side of it is, of course, reputation. But I think what set me aside from it was really the niche of working with builders, and learning what it took to get paid. I know it sounds silly, but to get paid, but to stay in the game long enough to where you can keep your crews going and pay them every Friday. That's what's made me different.
Yeah.
The other difference, and my project manager Robert, he can attest to this, and he hates it. If I'm in the wrong, I'll pay for it, right? I remember one of the biggest losses that we've had was probably about 2 years ago. Our guys just didn't follow the plan, and it cost the company $10,000. Well, I wasn't going to go back to my client and say, this is going to be $10,000 more because of my mistake. I'm going to continue the project. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to eat it. A majority of these contractors, a lot of their pride's like, I can't take that kind of loss. Well, you can't afford not to take that kind of loss, because think about the repercussions of what's going to happen to you afterwards. One, your guys aren't going to get paid, right? If that happens, you've lost your ball game right there. I mean, you've lost your team.
You're going to burn a bridge with that homeowner.
Yeah, you're going to burn a bridge with that homeowner. And hopefully that homeowner, now again, the homeowners, we were dealing with businesses and companies at that time. Once you have that one bad taste in their mouth, I don't care. You could, and it's true, you could do the greatest showcase in the world for them on their showroom and their headquarters. But you miss one spot on their client's house or their homeowner's house, and they'll remember that before they remember you just did you just did $100,000 thing on their showroom. So reputation has a lot to do with it. Having the staying power and swallowing or eating crow, as my dad would say. You've got to be able to eat crow. Yeah, you didn't make $60,000 on this particular job. You might have only made $30,000, but you made money.
And you're going to learn for the next one.
And you kept your guys employed, right? You kept your guys employed for however long of a stint that project was. And now you can go on for another one, because you can look that client in the eye and say, I'm going to finish it.
And you had started that conversation off with you really do have those three jobs where some you lose money, some you break even, and some you're going to hit home runs. The home runs are what make up for some of the eating crow jobs.
Hence the threshold of pain.
Got it.
Right. It hasn't been roses and unicorns. It really hasn't. And for lack of better words, it depends on what kind of degenerate gambler you really are, Because in essence, if you think about it, investments or entrepreneurship or anything, including general contracting, by definition is risk. There's going to be some inherent risk that's in there. How you control it.
Risk management.
Exactly. That's basically it. And how do you do that? With the team that you pay every Friday, with following the protocols, by sticking to your guns, saying, you know what, I'm not going to drop my price $1,000 for you, because this is the right thing to do. And this is how we're going to run the project. So I think that's the biggest difference, is my pain threshold. Is I go into every job thinking we're going to make money, but we're also going to set parameters to where if we're going to lose, we're going to be able to control that loss a little bit, because we know where it's coming from, what angle it's coming from, whether it be, you know what, man, I don't know what's behind that wall. I budgeted $3,000 to restructure this thing, but until I get into it, I'm not going to know for sure. It's being able to take that risk, and you've got to be able to accept the consequences, right? Including any contract that I walk into, the consequence may be I'm going to lose money, because I want to make sure that client is taken care of, come hell or high water, within reason. Yeah. And of course, your budget. A lot of these contractors, that's where they lose it. They'll lose it by trying to make things cheaper because they charge a certain price and they found out that it was more expensive to do for their subcontractors. They don't want to go back to their client to say it, but they need to. You've got to be able to budget your money. Also, the draw schedules that you're on. You can't expect to get paid every Friday just like you pay your workers. It's not going to work like that.
It's managing cash
Yeah, it's
flow.
managing cash flow. Not saying that we're the greatest because we've gone through ups and downs as well. And man, if I was to raise my hand to, how many failures do you have? More failures or successes? I would say a lot more failures than I've had successes, and I think that's where I'm at right now. I think a lot of the so-called success that you're seeing our company's gone through is basically just our ability to maintain our failures and be able to learn from them and move forward with them and have a different set of problems. And I think that's what makes a difference.
Well, from the gambling aspect, you're absolutely right. In entrepreneurship and in every business, we have to have a certain amount of risk. From your standpoint, the education. When you look at a wall and you say, "I budgeted $3,000," at least it's the education from the previous jobs that
That's
you've
what it
gone
is.
to. So the fact that you're able to. It's not degenerate gambling if you're gambling with something that you've done before and it's worked out. Because when you talked about, at least at the beginning stages of your company, when you're looking at houses to flip, you can uncover a lot of different things, but it's also, what am I willing to do for this specific job to where, man, I could make a little bit more money, but I'm not going to leave the job site the right way.
Yeah.
And that's also, I think, what differentiates a contractor is when no one's looking, and when you're able to put drywall over a certain amount of mistakes, are you fixing those mistakes before you walk into the next job?
And you can't. I mean, you really can't do that. And I've never really, well, actually, no, I can tell you this. I've never walked away from a job. Maybe once in the 10 years that I've been here, but it was different circumstances. I still did what it took to make it right, i.e. paying the clients back or paying a contractor that they hired to finish the job. But the main thing is that I was able to walk away and say, yeah, we finished. We finished it. We took it to the limit, and we did what we could. And I mean, it is what it is at that particular point. But that's only happened, like I said, it the one time in my life.
Certainly. And all contractors have the job or the customer that didn't work out the right way. And I definitely look back at some of my customers and think, where I am today is so different from where I was back in the day.
Sure.
But yeah, agreed. I think, the way that you're able to leave the customer and basically make sure that you can walk away with your head held high is the important thing.
It is.
One thing that's a shared trait of a lot of people that we have on here is the passion that you have for what you do. Can you touch on where that came from, or where you think that came from, and how you're able to go day to day? Obviously, you said the threshold for pain, and I think most successful contractors have that same trait. But what would you say is the jumping off point from the passion side?
It's really my parents. It's really my family. We lost my father when he was 93. This was back in 2022, right? And the reason why I bring that up is because they opened up a pet store. This was, like I said, it's over 55 years. In fact, at one particular point, my parents had one of the biggest pet supply distributorships in the state of Texas. We were doing nickel and dime stores like Wynn's. You might be too young for that, but Wynn stores, TJ Maxx's, they had sections of pet supplies, and we would go in there and we would stock them and they would sell them. Well, my mom and dad actually started this. My mom came from Kowloon when she was 16. My dad was 32 when they were married. Okay, it was through a matchmaker. This was accepted back then, and my dad chose mom, swiped right, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the reasons why that really happened was because they wanted to come to America because of communist China back then. Mom got here, and it really is that age-old immigrant story. They came in, had nothing, right? The way that the story goes, my little brother, he was 5. I'm sorry, my older brother, he was 5 at the time. They went to a state fair. he had won a goldfish, one little goldfish. They brought him home in a bag, and there was a little bowl with it, right? So once that happened, my dad had this crazy idea. You know what? I think I'm gonna start selling goldfish. So he did out of part time, out of their garage. They had a concrete cylindrical. It looks like a watering tank almost that you see out in the farms, and he filled them full of that, and he would sell them for 5 cents a piece, right? So it started from there, and then of course my mom, she's the real genius behind the business. She had that. I'm gonna make it happen. 7 days a week, she was in there. She was selling, and then she got a big break. Believe it or not, Mexican nationals came in, and they started buying droves of goldfish from her. And from that particular point, she started carrying merchandise, actual dry goods and merchandise, dog food, cat food. Uh, Back then, the biggest, one of the bigger names of pet supplies was like Hagen, Pimplex, things of that nature. She started picking up on that. So it got so big, and she's probably going to kill me for saying this, and this is off record because I'm not going to say the name of the company. But at one particular point, IRS reasons why, at one particular point, that company back in the 1980s was doing anywhere between 1 million to 1.5 million a week in sales.
Whoa.
Yes, for a business back in 1980. Um, we opened up 2 retail stores in the midst of that. And so during that process, growing up with that, I didn't have a childhood. My childhood was, after school, I would walk back to the pet store, work at the pet store, and that was my day. My weekends, I didn't have weekends. My weekends were spent working retail or working in their pet store and watching it just explode.
And
Um,
that's so exciting too, especially for a kid who's in the family business, and you were able to see, probably some arguments stemming from, oh, the
oh,
business isn't doing good, and do we have money for this and this, and then being able to be in the business, and you were working on it every day or every weekend while your
yep,
friends
yep.
are doing something fun. You're back at the pet store every day, but to see that progression of change, and especially a rapid progression, I mean, that's like a rocket ship at some point.
It is. It is. It is. I think a blessing was not only to be able to see that, but it was also to be able to see the failures too. It wasn't short after that. I would say probably 1992, 1993. We started seeing really bigger boxes come in and a different sense of marketing come in to where people could actually start buying stuff online, right? Petland, Petco, those guys really started coming in. Walmart really started coming in and carrying, started carrying a lot of supplies. That cut our business, I mean, 90% of it. Um, at one particular point, I remember over by the airport, there was a 35,000 square foot warehouse that we had just bought. And within 6 or 7 months after that, we had gotten foreclosed on it because the business was overnight just stopped. They didn't stop there though. They lost all their money. They went bankrupt. They kept one business open, and it's still open till today. And so that's where I think I got my pain threshold from, but more so my passion seeing something from, you know, one little goldfish turning into $1.5 million a week. That's what gets me pumped up. Coincidentally enough, I never wanted to get into the pet store business because I had worked in it, you know, for so long. I was like, no, I want to get into something different. And but that's really where I got it. Um, I think you got to take the good with the bad, but you got to take them both as experiences to learn from, and that's exactly what they went through. And they're still here. My mom's still there. She's 76 and she works 7 days a week. She's still at the pet store, and they're doing very well. They're doing extremely well. That's where it came from, though.
That's a great story, and I think it's maybe not a passion specifically for contracting. I think you just have a passion for life.
I do.
So outside of work, what are you passionate about?
Hunting and fishing.
Hell yeah.
So the backstory to that, the only time that my dad took off was to go hunting and fishing. Being born and raised in San Antonio, that's all we have to do around here for me is just drink beer, hunt and fish, and that's all I did as a kid. But more importantly, going out there and doing that, it conservation to me is a huge thing. Uh, I think Texas Parks and Wildlife and what they do is amazing because they're trying to set boundaries for the future. Um,
Lord knows people need boundaries.
they do, including myself, and a
Guide
filter.
guidelines and different parameters to do our things within.
That's correct. I think a lot of it came to when you're sitting in a deer blind or sitting on a boat and just fishing. There's nothing but silence. It gives you a chance to reflect and really see things. One of the coolest things that I've ever seen was, we hunted a piece of property for almost 20 or 30 years. It was through a friend of the family, but I remember when we first started, my little brother and I would sit there for hours and only see maybe a deer or a coyote or not even that. Now we're actually looking at a herd of 20 or 30, which really brings me back to how I built the business, because over a period of 15 years, you have to conserve. You have to actually see it grow. You can't just take everything out. You got to let it grow and grow and grow. And seeing that, it worked miracles. And you put that in the mentality of business. You've got to let it grow. You've got to take those chances. You've got to know where your weaknesses are. You've got to be able to cut the things out that are hurting or hindering your growth. And that's what we've done.
The weak link.
Yep. And that's what we do. And that's really where I've gotten that kind of mentality from.
That's awesome. Yeah, being able to see that from two completely different
absolutely
scenarios.
I know it sounds weird, but yeah, it is absolutely. I think to me, conservation it leads to, or the mindset of understanding the surroundings all around you, what affects it, including economic climate, including, okay, well, do the guys need to get paid every Friday, or what happens if they can, or what type of loan do we get this time, or what resources are around to help this business grow? How do we grow those resources? Everything can be a tool, right? And how you grow them and develop each tool that you have is really important, and that goes back to the conservation. You're conserving, in my opinion, your tools. You're growing them in a correct way, and you're weeding out what you don't need, just like you do with conservation. That's
Brilliant.
just exactly like you do with conservation.
Brilliant. From that perspective, where do you see this going in the next 10 to 15 years?
Oh, I want out. I want out. I want out of it, brother.
Well, but just, if we look at things from a different perspective, right? The conservation efforts were put in place because humans took advantage of lawlessness, right? Especially out in the great unknown. But when we look at the places that we live and the places that, you're a big part of someone else's 30, 40, 50 year life plan, right?
Sure.
When you build or when you put things in place that a homeowner pays for, they're wanting to work with you because they want to enjoy something for 20 or 30 years. From that perspective specifically, we talk about the types of building materials that we use or the type of insulation that we use. What are some things that you do and that you see coming through the pipeline, not only from a inventory standpoint, but also from a building perspective?
Kind of like I told you how I'm not an engineer. I'm not a politician either. And yes, I truly believe that that's going to cause, especially if you think about it, a good portion of our lumber comes from China. Believe it or not, it does. I think that's going to take a little bit of a toll. I think the way people are investing their monies, like i.e., you have investors that want to do a multifamily and invest in a multifamily, and their first thought is, I'm going to get a container home. And that's what's going to happen. I'm going to put up these container homes because they're so cheap and they're easy to go through, and I can get them through the city, and this is what's going to happen. But that's not the case. I think with environmentalists that are coming in, you have there's three outside of stick building, 3 different types of homes that I see getting tossed around constantly. It's like I said, the container stores, the boxables, but there's one more that we started looking into. They're called SIPs. They're structurally integrated panels. And so basically what it is, in short, to build a home, they give you metal studs, and they literally just put panels up, and it's quicker. The E value is better. Your R value is better. Your insulation, it
creates a very tight envelope.
Your envelope is tight, and we're moving more towards that. but it's costing more. I see things like the SIPs being more viable than these boxables, specifically because where these investors are wanting to put them. If they want to put them in Spring Branch, all day. But specifically where my company's going and concentrating on is infield development. That's not the easiest step in the whole wide world. Not every city is going to look at it, including San Antonio, is going to look at a boxable plan and say, yeah, no inspections are needed. You're good. And walk away from it.
Yeah, and that's a great point too, because I've been to a couple SIPs houses, and I think the idea has far preceded the knowledge behind it. I think we are at the very early stages of how to properly do these
importantly,
types
cost
of construction, the cost as well.
More importantly, the cost. The concept is still relatively new. That the cost is it just doesn't. It makes sense for those who can afford it and care if they have a R value of 100,000, they're going to pay that money for it, especially here in Texas.
For more of like a passive home type design or development.
That's correct. Whereas you got to look at like the SIPs versus the containers or the boxable homes. Those are quick, easy put up. I can have it cash flowing pretty relatively quick. I think that's where we're going to be moving towards, though. I think the SIPs are going to be, they're going to start becoming a highlight. Other things that are creeping up that I'm hearing about, and to that point to SIPs is hemp. I don't know if you heard about that or not.
Of course.
Where they're shooting hemp, and what they're saying is that's your insulation, that's your exterior, you're doing it all at once. But if you actually look at the cost of building it, you're like, no.
So funny enough, I've actually I did the first hemp building course in Colorado with Steve Allen back in 2014.
It's cool stuff.
It's been a minute, and now the back in the day it used to be pour these. It's basically hemp, lime, and a binder, and then you mix it with water. And in general, we have a product there that is mold proof, it's fireproof, it's bug resistant. But the cost, we go back to what is available for mass markets and what are things that are going to be, what are you going to be able to get a loan for? Because most of these are not even available from a lending standpoint.
And that's the biggest deal. Is a lot of these investors, they do leverage their money, and that's what they run into quite a bit is they think they're going to be able to get a loan on a home, but a majority of these financing companies, they need something stick built. They won't do modular homes. They won't. It takes a finite, and they're out there. There's a lot of hard money lenders out there that'll do that for you, but I mean you're paying a pretty penny on it to where your ROI is not going to be as pretty at the end of the day. And I think that's what's really going to make a difference.
Totally.
Is that mentality change versus, the advancement of technology, including your SIPs. That's what's really going to start coming up, I think. And I think the panels are going to be your closest thing to it. I don't think boxables for my needs is going to be anywhere near as close as me using an SIP. And we've already actually started looking into that as well.
Well, I love your passion. I love, I love the knowledge behind it, because that in essence is
through failures, brother.
Absolutely, it always is. Unfortunately, it's hard to learn from successes because you don't have the pain, and I think the pain is actually what makes you change at the end of the day.
Your threshold.
So, I totally appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise. How do people find you?
Go to our website. We're at www.reconstructiontexas.com. On that site, there are ways that you can contact us, including a sheet if you have a project that you're wanting to work on, or even if you just have questions on something. Please, we have a team that's ready to answer that phone call or get back with you.
Amazing. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.